when action movies didn't pause to explain themselves? They just threw you into the danger and trusted you to keep up? In 1981, Paramount Pictures released Raiders of the Lost Ark, a globe-trotting adventure directed by Steven Spielberg and produced by George Lucas. The film starred Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, a fedora-wearing archaeologist who solved problems with a whip, a revolver, and a remarkable tolerance for pain. Karen Allen played Marion Ravenwood, one of the toughest love interests of the era. John Rhys Davies, Denholm Elliott, and Paul Freeman rounded out a cast that made ancient history feel dangerous again. Today, we're diving into 15 weird facts about Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But before we grab the fedora, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps this channel uncover more behind-the-scenes chaos from the movies that shaped a generation. Alright, let's get into it, and stick around for number 1 because the moment that defined Indiana Jones was improvised by an actor who could barely stand. Number 15, Tom Selleck was originally Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford wasn't the first choice for Indiana Jones. He wasn't even the second, to be honest. The role belonged to Tom Selleck. Selleck screen tested and he nailed it.
We ended up doing a screen test with Tom Selleck and Sean Young, and it was really, really good. I mean, they were both terrific actors, and it turned out really well.
Spielberg and Lucas were sold. He had the charm, the physicality, and the leading man swagger. He accepted the role and Indiana Jones was officially his. Then CBS got in the way. Selleck had already filmed a pilot for a little show called Magnum P.I.
At that time, the head of CBS said, wait a minute, we have a series commitment with Tom Selleck called Magnum P.I., and he greenlit the series. Tom had a TV series that took him to great, heights of fame and fortune, and we had nothing.
When the network picked it up, they refused to release him from his contract. Spielberg and Lucas scrambled. Filming was approaching fast, and their Indiana Jones was legally trapped in Hawaii wearing Hawaiian shirts. Here's where it gets painful. A television writer's strike hit shortly after, delaying Magnum for months. In a slightly different timeline, Selleck could have done both. He would have wrapped Raiders and owned the franchise forever. Instead, the door cracked open for someone else. George Lucas had resisted casting Harrison Ford. He didn't want to reuse his Star Wars lead so soon, but with no time left, Ford stepped in with a different energy.
Turned out CBS wouldn't let me do it. They held the offer out for about a month. Harrison Ford hates to hear this, and Harrison, this is your role and you're indelible in it, so it's just an interesting story.
He was less polished and more irritated, a hero who survived through grit, not grace. Number 14, Harrison Ford didn't fake the truck chase, he survived it. Harrison Ford didn't hand the Nazi truck chase off to a stunt double.
I'm sure it's not dangerous. See, if it was dangerous, they would have waited till we got more of the movie done.
He was the stunt double. The stunt was inspired by a classic moment from Stagecoach, but this wasn't some carefully padded homage. The crew dug a trench under the road so Ford could be pulled beneath the truck while it rolled over him. He wore a concealed harness, and the whole thing was filmed in one continuous run. And the truck flip was no hydraulics or digital assist.
So I want to see, well, how's the second unit with the truck chase? And, then we remember Dale have to go to England and then come back to Tunisia. So it was a couple days before I would see any of the dailies from Mickey Shoot.
The stunt team fired a telephone pole straight up through the truck's floorboards, launching the thing into the air like a metal ragdoll. Pause the movie at the right frame and you can still spot the pole doing the dirty work. Between the dragging, the beating, and the back-to-back practical stunts, that sequence cemented Ford's reputation as a leading man who earned every wince and turned Raiders into the gold standard for practical action filmmaking.
And then, of course, Steven went back and filled in all the close shots with Harrison. I was able to make one shot for Steven with actually Harrison being dragged.
Today, that sequence would involve motion capture, previs, and a small battalion of safety coordinators, but in 1980, they dug a hole, trusted the math, and let Ford take the hit. Number 13, the flying wing explosion went sideways and everyone dove for their lives. The Desert Airfield Showdown in Raiders features one of the most satisfying explosions of the 1980s. A Nazi flying wing spinning out of control, then erupting in a massive fireball. The production built a full-scale flying wing, steel frame, plywood skin, heavy enough to pass for an actual aircraft. Vickers in the UK constructed it and shipped it out like military surplus. This thing wasn't a lightweight prop, it had presence. For the final shot, Spielberg wanted authenticity, so the effects team loaded the plane with real fuel and live pyrotechnics. Light the fuse, capture the blast, move on, but the blast had other plans. When the charges detonated, the explosion came in way hotter than anyone calculated. A wall of fire ripped across the airfield. Debris shot in directions nobody had accounted for. Crew members and extras scattered like someone had yelled incoming and meant it. Somehow, nobody was seriously hurt. Once the smoke cleared and everyone confirmed they still had all their limbs, Spielberg reviewed the footage. He kept the shot, because of course he did. Number 12, Karen Allen was accidentally set on fire, and they kept shooting. The Nepal bar fight in Raiders looks chaotic on screen. There's fire everywhere, bottles smashing, Marion holding her own like a woman who's thrown a punch before.
If I was going to swing a punch, I wanted to swing a punch, and I wasn't going to, do it halfway.
Some of that chaos was a little too real though. Crew members stood just off camera with wet blankets and extinguishers ready to jump in if things went sideways, and things went sideways. During filming, Allen's costume caught on fire. Flames ran up her back before anyone realized it wasn't part of the choreography. A crew member rushed in and put it out immediately. Allen wasn't injured, but she was shaken, understandably so.
First experience with acting to nothing, it was Steven over on the sidelines going, and now the head is exploding, and there's something coming out, which I have now since done so many times on so many films.
And then, because this was 1980 and safety shutdowns weren't really a thing, they just kind of kept rolling. The frantic energy in the finished scene carries a real edge. Part of it comes from the fact that moments earlier, Allen had actually been on fire. The adrenaline was genuine and the fear was earned. Marion Ravenwood survived the bar fight, and Karen Allen was happy to just survive the set. Number 11, the boulder got bigger because Spielberg couldn't let it go. The boulder run at the start of Raiders is seared into pop culture. Indy grabs the idol, the trap triggers, and a 22-foot fiberglass sphere tries to flatten him into archaeological paste. Originally, that chase was supposed to be quick. Then Spielberg watched the boulder roll. He loved it. The scale, the speed, the visual absurdity of Harrison Ford sprinting from a giant ball like his life depended on it, which, given the setup, it kind of did. So Spielberg did what Spielberg does. He extended the runway for more distance, more tension, and more takes of Ford outrunning a mechanically driven prop that didn't care about pacing. Spielberg later called the decision an absolute idiocy.
The ball was my idea where we were knocking out set pieces and making suggestions. I just said, at some point some huge boulder should start chasing Indy and almost squishes him 3 or 4 times until he gets out of the cave. And that was just something I thought up.
Director speak for, wow, that could have gone very wrong. And here's the twist. On set, the boulder made almost no sound. Hollow fiberglass rolling on a track is practically silent. All that weight and doom you feel watching the scene came later. Sound designer Ben Burt had to build the terror from scratch. He layered recordings of a car rolling over gravel with thunder, low impacts, and carefully placed echo effects. Suddenly, a lightweight prop sounded like 10 tons of ancient revenge. The final sequence runs longer than planned, hits harder than expected, and opened a blockbuster with one of the most imitated shots in cinema history. Number 10, 7,000 snakes weren't enough. 7,000 snakes.
We have to get more snakes. You know what we really need? We need about 7,000 snakes in addition to the 2,000 we have here to make it work.
That's how many the production wrangled for the Well of Souls set. Enough to carpet the floor in slithering, hissing chaos, and it still wasn't enough. Under the hot studio lights, the cold-blooded performers started clocking out. Many got sluggish, and some curled up. Others fell asleep mid-scene like they'd wandered onto the wrong call sheet, so the crew improvised, slicing thousands of feet of rubber hoses into snake-length pieces and scattering them across the pit. Real snakes, fake snakes, unconscious snakes, it all blended into one indistinguishable reptile carpet. Harrison Ford had to walk directly through the mess despite a very real fear of snakes.
In the famous shot of me facing the cobra, you can barely see a reflection on the sheet of glass that was between myself and the cobra.
The man got dragged under trucks without complaint, but the snake pit genuinely rattled him. Karen Allen had it rougher in one specific shot. A live cobra was positioned inches from her face with only a sheet of plexiglass between her and a venomous snake. The cobra lunged during filming and hit the glass hard. If you pause the movie at the right frame, you can still catch a faint reflection, a tiny ghost of the barrier that kept production from making a very different kind of headline. The audience saw endless horror. The crew saw controlled chaos held together with hoses and hope. Number 9, Indiana Jones was born from a beach walk and a bruised ego. One of cinema's greatest action heroes was sketched out on a beach by two guys who should have been doing literally anything else. It was 1977. Spielberg had just been rejected from his dream gig, directing a James Bond movie. Meanwhile, George Lucas was hiding out in Maui, dodging the anxiety of the upcoming Star Wars premiere like it owed him money. Spielberg started venting. He still wanted to make a globe-trotting adventure film, a hero who punched first and never asked questions. Lucas perked up and said, "I've got something better than Bond. Not suave, scrappy. A beat-up archaeologist who bled, improvised, and fought his way through history instead of gliding through it." Lucas had been kicking the idea around for years. He even had a name ready, Indiana Smith.
The Indiana Jones story started before I was working on the screenplay for Star Wars.
Spielberg liked everything except that. Smith sounded like a guy who unclogs drains, so they swapped it right out there on the sand, Indiana Jones. That casual conversation became the foundation for Raiders of the Lost Ark and eventually brought in Lawrence Kasdan to turn their beach pitch into an actual screenplay. Spielberg lost Bond, Lucas dodged his own premiere, and somehow that cocktail of rejection and avoidance gave us a fedora, a whip, and one of the most enduring heroes in film history. Hollywood's a bit weird like that. Number 8, Spielberg's childhood fantasy became the first shot in the movie. Before Steven Spielberg was directing blockbusters, he was a kid making home movies, and he was already thinking like a studio head. He created a make-believe production company called Playmount. The name was a mashup, part Paramount, part a play on his own last name, Spielberg, roughly translating to Play Mountain in German. So the kid basically named his fake studio after himself and Hollywood's biggest mountain logo at the same time. But here's the idea that stuck with him. Even as a child, Spielberg imagined the studio mountain dissolving into a real one, a seamless transition from logo to movie. He carried that concept around for years, waiting for the right project to finally pull it off. Raiders was the project. Spielberg sent producer Frank Marshall on a very specific mission across Hawaii. Find a mountain that could convincingly pass for the Paramount Peak. Not a vague resemblance, a match. Marshall spent hours driving around the island, comparing ridgelines to a corporate trademark like the world's most scenic scavenger hunt. He eventually found Mount Shubit, snapped some pictures, and brought them back. Spielberg loved it immediately. That dissolve, Paramount's peak melting into a real Hawaiian mountainside, became the very first image audiences saw in Raiders. A childhood idea, decades in the making, pulled off in one quiet transition before the adventure even starts. And Spielberg pushed the nostalgia even further. Instead of using Paramount's current 1981 logo, he swapped in the version from the 1940s. It was older, rougher, and completely in sync with the period setting. Before Harrison Ford shows up, before anyone says a word, the movie is already telling you this story belongs to another era. A kid's homemade production company logo became the blueprint for the opening shot of one of the biggest films of the decade. Spielberg had been rehearsing for Raiders since grade school. He just needed a few decades and a Hawaiian mountain to make it real. Okay, we're going to take a quick pause because if you're enjoying this trip through Hollywood chaos and melting Nazis, hit like and subscribe. It keeps this channel running and helps us dig up more stories from the movies that shaped us. Okay, let's get back into the countdown with number 7. Spielberg used old Hollywood tricks to build Raiders and end it. Raiders of the Lost Ark looks like a movie that burned through cash. Every frame screams prestige.
Indy! Ow!
Jesus!
Where'd you get this? From him? I was trying to escape. No thanks to you.
Spielberg was actually pinching pennies. Working with a tight budget, he figured out something nobody would catch. Instead of building every period shot from scratch, he raided the studio vault. The 1930s Washington, D.C. streets were pulled from the Hindenburg, a 1975 disaster film that had nothing to do with archaeologists or melting faces. The plane that carries Indy and Marion out of Nepal came from Lost Horizon, a 1973 adventure most people had already forgotten. That same old school craftsmanship shows up in the final shot as well. After everything Indy survives, the Ark gets boxed up, stamped with a label, and wheeled into an endless government warehouse. No victory lap, just bureaucracy swallowing divine power like surplus office furniture. Spielberg borrowed that moment directly from Citizen Kane, where Wells pulls the camera back to reveal a warehouse of forgotten treasures with Rosebud tossed among them like it never mattered. Same visual language, same gut punch, just different fedora. The warehouse itself wasn't real. Matte artist Michael Pangrazio painted the entire thing on glass, leaving a small opening for one worker pushing the crate into oblivion. One man, one box, endless shelves faded into nothing. A pulp adventure suddenly felt mythic, almost tragic. Spielberg recycled Hollywood's past to build Raiders, then used one final classic trick to remind us that even legends get filed away. Number 6, R2-D2 and C-3PO are hiding in the Well of Souls. Lucasfilm artists have never been able to resist a good Easter egg, and Raiders has one of the best hidden in plain sight. Carved into the golden pillars of the Well of Souls right there in ancient Egypt are two very familiar droids. R2-D2 and C-3PO rendered as hieroglyphics like they've been trapped in that tomb for 3,000 years. The clearest one appears on a pillar just to Indy's left as he and Sala prepare to lift the Ark's stone lid. Art director Norman Reynolds had worked on both Star Wars and Raiders and apparently couldn't resist leaving a little cross-franchise graffiti behind.
But everything in there was really entirely Egyptian, apart from little engravings of 3PO on the wall, one or two other little niceties that...
Sharp-eyed viewers have spotted a second carving deeper in the scene, one that appears to show Princess Leia inserting the Death Star plans into R2. That moment from A New Hope immortalized as Egyptian art. The tradition continued. The droid showed up again in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, tucked into a throne room tile like stowaways. A secret handshake between two franchises and a reward for the obsessives who freeze frame everything. Number 5, Raiders went from popcorn movie to official national treasure. In 1999, the Library of Congress did something quietly wild. It selected Raiders of the Lost Ark for preservation in the National Film Registry. That's the list reserved for films deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Very formal language for a movie where a guy shoots a swordsman because he's too tired to choreograph a fight. But there it was, Raiders, sitting in the same national category as Casablanca, Citizen Kane, and Star Wars. Spielberg and Lucas never designed Raiders to be important. They wanted fast, fun, and old school. No prestige ambitions, no award season campaigning, just a 2-hour adrenaline shot wrapped in a leather jacket and a fedora. Nearly 20 years later, the US government looked at that adrenaline shot and said, yeah, protect this one forever. Being added to the registry means a pristine copy now lives in the library's moving image collection, preserved against deterioration so future generations can experience every dust particle, whip crack, and melting Nazi exactly as intended. Indiana Jones spent the whole movie chasing artifacts and protecting history. Turns out, history was paying attention. The man who belongs in a museum finally ended up next to one. Number 4, George Lucas spent an entire day trying to get a monkey to do a Nazi salute. In the Cairo marketplace scenes, Indy and Marion pick up an unwanted traveling companion, a small capuchin monkey that seems adorable until you realize it's working for the other side. The monkey is a Nazi spy. It reports back to Belloc. It even delivers a tiny Nazi salute to its superior officers. Getting that salute on film nearly broke George Lucas. The monkey had been trained to raise its arm on cue. Rehearsal, no problem. But the second the cameras rolled, it wanted nothing to do with the bit. So the crew dangled a bunch of grapes just out of frame, high enough that the monkey had to reach straight up to grab them. Then they filmed it over and over again. More than 50 takes of a capuchin reaching for fruit hoping one would pass as a military salute. George Lucas oversaw the whole operation as a second unit director. The man who created an entire galaxy spent his afternoon negotiating with a primate over snack placement. By all accounts, he was not thrilled about how his day went, but somewhere in that mountain of footage, one take worked. The arm went up at the right angle, held just long enough, and they grabbed it before the monkey changed its mind. Harrison Ford did his own stunts. Karen Allen survived being set on fire, and a capuchin monkey held an entire second unit hostage with nothing but stubbornness and a love for grapes. Number 3. Indiana Jones' fedora had to be engineered to survive the movie. Indiana Jones without the fedora is just a sweaty professor having the worst week of his life. The hat makes the silhouette, it sells the character, and it's non-negotiable. The hat also kept flying off. During early stunt work on Raiders, the fedora had zero interest in staying put. Running through temples, getting dragged behind trucks, every action beat was a potential hat disaster, and reshooting because the fedora went rogue wasn't exactly in the budget. So the costume department stopped treating it like a hat and started treating it like gear. They modified the interior with hidden elastic that secured the fedora directly to Harrison Ford's head with a discreet rigging system that let Ford sprint, fight, and dive without the hat launching into the atmosphere. The fix worked. Costume designer Deborah Nadoolman Landis had already put work into making the hat look lived in. She rolled it, crushed it, sat on it, gave it the kind of wear that suggested Indy had owned it for years.
The audience had to buy Harrison, even in this exaggerated heroic part, as an earthy, brilliant archaeologist.
That broken-in shape helped it sit lower on Ford's brow, which made the elastic's job easier. Indiana Jones survived ancient traps and melting Nazis. His fedora survived something harder, filmmaking. Number 2, Raiders didn't need Indiana Jones in the title until it did. The movie hit theaters in 1981 as Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, just Raiders. Paramount looked at a film starring a brand new action hero nobody had ever heard of and said, the title's fine, they'll figure it out. Bold move. It worked. By the time the boulders started rolling, audiences knew exactly who Indiana Jones was. The fedora, the whip, John Williams blasting through the speakers, the character introduced himself just fine without his name on the marquee. For years, that was the title everyone knew. Then the sequels stacked up, and George Lucas decided the franchise needed uniform branding. Same hero, same naming pattern, easier shelf placement at Blockbuster. The title Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark first appeared on the 1999 VHS reissue and stuck through the 2003 DVD release. Same movie, new label on the box. Now here's the thing though, the film itself never changed.
Let's go see him together. I've got nothing better to do.
Uncle Indy, come back home now! Indy, get back home!
The Library of Congress preserved it under the original name. Film historians still reference it that way. The branding caught up eventually, but the movie never budged. Indiana Jones became a household name without needing his name in the title. The title just took a few years to acknowledge what everyone already knew. Number 1, Tunisia nearly shut Raiders down and gave us its funniest scene. Tunisia was supposed to deliver authenticity. Endless desert, blazing sun, the perfect stand-in for 1930s Egypt. It delivered food poisoning instead. Almost the entire cast and crew went down. Not with mild discomfort, full-scale collapse. People dropping on set, schedules disintegrating, more bodies horizontal than vertical. Harrison Ford got hit hard. He lost weight fast, worked in short bursts, and spent most of his downtime trying not to fall over. One person stayed fine. Spielberg had packed suitcases full of canned food before leaving the States. SpaghettiOs, pork and beans, nothing local, nothing risky. While everyone else gambled on the water and lost, he sat in his tent eating room temperature pasta and kept directing. That paranoid packing may have saved Raiders. With the crew gutted, having a functional director was the only thing keeping production from shutting down entirely. Then came the Cairo marketplace scene. The script called for an elaborate whip versus sword duel. Big choreography, multi-day shoot. Stunt performer Terry Richards had trained for weeks, spinning his blade like a madman who expected serious screen time. Ford watched him warming up, exhausted, sick, and barely vertical, and made a suggestion that changed everything. Why don't I just shoot him? Spielberg said yes immediately. Nobody expected the shortcut to land the way it did. That single gunshot became one of the biggest laughs in cinema history and a perfect distillation of who Indiana Jones is. No flash, just a guy who solves problems fast and moves on. Raiders nearly died in Tunisia. Spielberg survived on canned pasta, Ford survived on grit, and exhaustion gave us a moment so perfect it defined the character forever.
Well, I'm coming with you, Jones. Get me out of here. Cut me loose. You can't leave me here.
I'll take you out of here now. They'll start combing the place for us.
Jones, you gotta get me out of here. Come on, Jones. Are you crazy?
And that's 15 weird facts about Raiders of the Lost Ark, a movie built on chaos that somehow became a cultural artifact. A film about chasing history that ended up filed away as history, right next to the stuff Indy would have told you belongs in a museum. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us your favorite Indy moment below. Until next time, this is Remember When.